days that it sticks in my memory for a long time. Yeah, it was over 50 years ago. There's a sort of an eyewitness. My dad was board and friends of mine. There's never left my memory. Yeah, it's something I won't forget. You know, it's something that I don't know what the right words are. You don't boast about, you know. But my perspective of it is, I was sort of a sightseer, if you know what I mean. Although involved in it, it came about that we were to go out the day before the practice run, and I probably would have been on the crew that day because the Irish inspector who were running came up and they cancelled the practice run because of the adverse weather. And the next day, the weather was horrendous. The seas were breaking over the harbour mouth pure white. And we got a call to go out to the sailors who were washed overboard on the Bergen. There was no horrendous for them. So there wasn't very many people gathered, you know, when Earth went on. It attracted the locals down onto the harbour because they knew the lifeboat was going out. It was phone calls from the Honour Secretary W.R. Knox to my father and various crew members and myself to get to the boathouse that the boat might be launched. And we arrived there and the conditions were horrendous. The district engineer sort of recommended, guys, this is not a nice sea to go out at. But we had sort of heard that the 8 Norwegian sailors were washed overboard were wearing life jackets, and there was a possibility that they were in a life raft. And the decision was taken between my father, his cops, and the members of the crew. If there's a chance, let's go. Probably at the end, it was an easy decision because while there's hope, there's life. Irrespective of the danger to themselves, I think they probably made the right decision at the end of the day. But it's not for me to say I was a junior member of the crew, and they launched, and I launched the boat. I got her ready. The guys got on board and put their gear on. I launched the boat, and the old Lady Scott was not the fastest boat in the fleet. It was only 8 knots, and the conditions that were there is not a great speed. At least 3 attempts to get out the harbour. We left the slipway, made the approach to the harbour mouth, and it looked too risky, so they turned back. And on the 3rd attempt they got out, and I was at the bottom of the slip at the time watching. And the thing that hit me very hard was on the 3rd attempt, when they did get out, there was a beam sea of pure white water that hit the starboard side. The boat just went pure sideways and was washed down past the south pier. As I'm sure you're aware, from the south pier onwards, it's very shallow water, sandbanks there, and I thought, my Christ, she wasn't self-righting then because there was no self-righting device on it. She was more or less an open boat, and the only shelter that the cops and the engineers had was in the cockpit with 2 sort of hook-on plastic doors. And it was a totally beam sea, and the boat went purely right-angled. And I thought, Christ, this is not good. I had visions of it being washed right into the West Bay because she would never have self-righted. And I thought, I'll get out of here and I'll head over and see what's happening. I got about halfway up the slipway when I heard the growl of the diesel engines. And I knew then that at least the propellers were in the water and they had a bit of power. thank God, seemed a lifetime, but probably was only about maybe half a minute. I saw the nose of the boat coming up past the south pier again. Knew them, great, head onto the sea, she'll make it. Out she went. You talk about relief, you know, it was unbelievable. If you hadn't seen it, you wouldn't have believed it really. The relief in me of those guys that went out still puts a lump in my throat. It was sort of above and beyond. Excuse me a minute. Right, I was so riveted in my own mind that even today, what they did was unbelievable. I'm so proud of every one of them. Heroes all. They hit the harbour mouth, the white water and the waves hit her on the starboard side long, which meant that automatically she would go right to left, so she was capsized. And that was the thing that worried me, that if she went over Beam's side, the water was getting shallower as the sea pushed her towards the beam, that she maybe wouldn't come, right herself again. So what those guys were feeling, when they were on that boat, it must have been as scary as hell. But they must have managed to get her head turned into it. Because once you go beam sea, the right hand or the starboard prop would be out of the water. And therefore you'd only have one prop in the water, which wouldn't have been strong enough at 8 knots, to out of it. So there must have been some fluke of nature that she went inside, maybe my dad turned the wheel or whatever, but the head of the boat must have come around into it, which meant that the 2 propellers then would have dug into the water, would have given her the full propulsion to get out to it head on. It seemed like a lifetime. In actual fact, it probably was, maybe not seconds, but certainly a few minutes. But from she hit the harbour mouth and she disappeared was, to me, a very short space of time. Because the sea on that particular day coming across the harbour mouth was just pure white water and high waves. I mean, she was an open deck boat, and in front of the cockpit there was 2, I'm trying to think of the word here, 2 cages, shall we say, that held the ropes inside it. That if you had to get them out and that they were open top, you could just reach in and lift them. Those were completely washed out. And anything else that was lying loose would have gone completely. But the boat I wasn't worrying about ropes or buoys or anything. I was only too glad to see the light going past the harbour mouth. I mean, ropes, buoys, and that could be replaced very, very easily. The radio on the boat, or the VHF, or that would have been in constant contact with the Coast Guard, letting them know the situation and what was happening. There would also been an MF with Malin Head, and the Coast Guard would have kept the families involved about what was happening and that everything was safe. And the Lady Scotland, which was a 46'9" Watson type lifeboat, was a very able seaboat. And once you're out in the open water, you've plenty of depth below you, and you can keep her head to sea, and you can control the conditions. You still had to search and come beam sea even out there. But in deeper water, the wave wouldn't have been so broken at the top. Well, that was normally taken over by the engineer, which would be Gilbert. On the old Watson, in those days, 65 up to 72, the coxswain had no control. He had no levers to control the engines, either hard ahead, hard astern, or whatever. He had to give instructions to the two engineers sitting down below with two gear wheels. So he would be given instruction to the engineer, full ahead or slow down, come into neutral and put port engine full ahead. And it was only after, I think it was around about 1972, because I joined them on Holyhead. They went to pool and got the self-rating bag on. And then they brought the gears up to the cockpit where the coxswain had control of the throttles. And I joined them on Holyhead. I think it was 1972 that she brought back with the self-rating bag on and full control down to the coxswain. But Gilbert would have been a combined job, not only engineer, but he would have navigated and he would have been the radio operator. Well, after Gilbert unfortunately died, son Derek took over in 1978, and then again, unfortunately, when Derek died, Anthony took over from Derek. But I was winchman in 1960, and I got on the crew at 61. And that particular day of the outing in 65, because of the conditions, they were a man short. But because I was sort of, shall I say, my father's son, and Noble Robert was available, who was the district engineer. Father, I don't think wanted two members of the same family on the boat that day because of the conditions. And Noble Robert volunteered to go. I was a gentleman and a scholar. Portrush, as I'm sure you know, coming in is more upward than going out. So they make the decision that if you can't come into Portrush, to go into Greencastle up the Boyle, where they're warmly greeted and looked after like nobody's business. And what would happen then is that in the morning they would contact the Honour Secretary here, see what the conditions were like at the harbour mouth, if they were passable, and if they were, then they would head for home. Oh, total relief. Total relief, but because the Marines weren't let off, the whole town weren't really aware that the boat was out, because normally back in 65, that was the signal to gather the crew, and the noise of those Marines, the whole town heard it, and a lot of people sort of rushed down to the harbour to see it going out. But because there was a phone call from the Honour Secretary, a big majority of them were not aware that the boat was out until they read about it probably in the paper the next day or the day after. They're all very, very the locals are all very, very conscious of the lifeboat and the service that it provides. And I said that they were, once they heard of the conditions and what happened, they were totally relieved that it was back and everybody was safe. The ONSEC would have notified each of the families and said, everything in the garden's rosy, the boat's leaving Greencastle at whatever time, and it'll be in Portrush safe and sound. And it was only after that, when the boat was rehoused and brought her up on the winch, the damage that was done. Bilge keel was ripped out of the boat. But, I mean, those guys deserve it. Deserve every credit. I was so vivid in my own mind, but even today, what they did was unbelievable. I'm so proud of every one of them. Hear us all.